Hello, and welcome to Boomer and Beyond Wellness. I'm Angela Fischetti, and this here is Uncle Harry. He's also known as Harrison Otis Carter III. Aren't you, Uncle Harry? Good to see you. Well, on a more serious note, Uncle Harry and I are here tonight to discuss with you the importance of understanding hip mobility, the mobility of your hip joint. Now, this is known as the acetobulofemoral joint. It's pronounced a couple of different ways, and it's also known as the coxal joint. Now, my certifying organization, the American Council on Exercise, has a very specific definition of joint mobility, because I think that a lot of people think it's flexibility, but you see, one has to do with muscle and the other one has to do with joint. So here we go. Joint mobility is defined as the degree to which an articulation, which is where two bones meet each other, can move before being restricted by surrounding tissues, aka the range of uninhibited movement around a joint. So the focus, like I said, hip joint, acetobulofemoral joint, also known as the coxal joint. This is a synovial ball and socket joint. So it's capable of multi-directional movements. It's multi-axial. And the joint itself is like a strong fibrous capsule, and it's designed for stability and weight bearing. Now, the types of movements that you'll encounter on multi-axial would be something that's out in front, anterior, posterior, off to the side, back toward the midline, and even big circle movements. So now I'm giving you a little hint of what else here is a ball and socket joint that we covered here on the channel already. So now what I'm going to do is stop and share. Well, I'm not going to stop, but I'm going to share the screen because I want to show you an image of the pelvis. There we go. So the bones that I want to point out to you here on this image would be the ilium. So you can see that these are like these big winged bones. They are pretty big. And we're looking at the anterior side of the skeleton. So that's the front side. So when you travel down, you're coming to the pubic bone. And then really more from a posterior perspective, then you have the ischium. Now, those of you who are yoga practitioners oftentimes hear about the sits bones. These are the sits bones, the ischium. Now, I want to share with you a little bit of my own personal experience, because I'm rather on a mission here, obviously, just to spread the word of strength training for both muscle and bone strength as we get older. At 60 years of age, I was diagnosed with osteoporosis, and it was actually a rather profound case. And so it took me 3 years of being patient, 3 years to, at 63, to be told I was downgraded to osteopenia. So it's important to understand that osteoporosis is a pathology, whereas osteopenia is not. However, one should not get cocky about that, right? You got to keep up with the strength training. So I want to call your attention to the femur bone, which is the thigh bone. And when you travel up, you're coming toward the femoral or femoral neck, depending upon how you want to pronounce it. And then the top of that, you go further up, and that's the femoral or femoral head. And that's that ball of that bone, and it goes into the socket. And you see there, the acetabulum is right there, and that's where the bone goes up into. It is at that femoral or femoral neck and ball or head that become quite porous. So this is kind of like a lace type effect. The bone becomes very lacy in appearance. And oftentimes people will fall but we don't know like what came first. Is it because you might have weak gluteals and surrounding hip muscles that you couldn't hold yourself up perhaps? Or did you fall because of a fracture to that area of the porous bone? And you just don't know. So that's why I want to really emphasize it's so important to make sure that you do your resistance training, your strength training, not only for strong muscles, but for strong bones, and will help prevent the falls, or at least if you fall, you don't have a devastating outcome. So at this point, what I'm going to do is I'm going to pause the recording because I have to shift me, the camera, and Uncle Harry around a little bit, but join us here in just a few moments. Right, Uncle Harry? Don't go anywhere, man. I got to put you to good use. Welcome back. Thank you for rejoining us here on the mat. So what I'd like to do here is show you those same structures, but here on Uncle Harry. And typically, this is a nice side. You can see the red, but this means different muscles and stuff. So we're going to work on this side, and I'm going to turn just a little bit this way for you. So here's the anterior side, the front side of that ilium. Like I said to you, it's a pretty large bone, right? And then, of course, there's the posterior side of it. And then when you travel down, here is that pubic bone. And then from a lateral perspective, I want you to see here that ischium right here. The ischium, that is the area of the sits bones. Obviously, it would be both sides of that pelvic bone. All right, now let's turn him forward. And now I want to show you the different movements of the hip. Now here you can see that it is definitely a ball. It's up into a socket, right? So that's the femoral or femoral head, and it's in that acetabulum up through here. And see that? All right. So what we're going to show you here now is hip flexion. There you go. Now the knee can be bent or straight. And then we return, if Uncle Harry will let me, with that screw. There we go. And we go back into hip extension. So hip flexion and hip extension. Now we're going to take him a little forward here so I can clear myself. And we're going to show you hip abduction, ABD. So you notice that I'm in abduction as well, right? And then we take him into adduction. I just moved in a little bit, but with adduction, you can even here go beyond the midline of the body. And then looking right here at that ball, we want to do what's called medial rotation of the hip joint. And it's also known as internal rotation. And then we have external rotation, which is also known as lateral rotation. But then we have that movement that I showed you here with that shoulder, that other ball and socket joint. We have what's called hip circumduction. It's like a circular or a rotation type movement, and it's a combination of the various movements. So we're going to go flexion into abduction, back toward adduction into extension. And again, flexion, and then abduction, adduction into extension. And if I had a more compliant skeleton that really goes circular, again, we're going to repeat the movement at that shoulder joint, the glenohumeral joint. So that's the information we have for you today. Always make sure you keep up with your strength training like we were talking about. Maintain the strength of your bones, of your muscles, and show your muscles extra love with some stretching and flexibility, and show those joint extra love with mobility. Make sure when you are working out that you are keeping yourselves hydrated. You want to eat your greens, eat your beans. I gotta feed this guy here. He's kind of like a little too thin, you know? And until next time, be well. Thank you all so much. And please, folks, if you like the content, please subscribe to the channel. I would surely appreciate it. Maybe give it a thumbs up, a kind comment, and even a share. Thank you all. Take care.